Good morning. This rocks. Didn't know that. I think Unity of Missoula does a really good job of having fun. I really appreciate that about everybody who's here. And as we move into our talk, I'm going to ask you what it is about this community, this church, that brought you here and keeps you here. We'll circle back to this. And today is a really wonderful day for lots of reasons. We're getting liquid love out there. I think it's probably the first time we've really all celebrated rain. It's such a gift. It's also something called the Lionsgate portal. I'm not an astrology expert, but I've been really kind of focused on what this Lionsgate portal is because it coincides on the 8th and the new moon. And just the Cliff Note version, my takeaway is that it's a really powerful day for manifestation. And that ties into my talk today because the title of my talk is how willing are we to allow life to burst through us? How willing are we to be authentic? Where are we feeling safe to be who we are and to speak our truth? Where do we feel afraid to stand up and speak our truth? Marissa Peer is a teacher of mine, and she teaches a form of hypnotism called rapid transformational therapy that I'm learning. And her premise is that human beings are born with two deep needs, deep emotional needs, and they're tied in with our survival. One is we have a need to connect. And two, we have a need to avoid rejection. And those two emotional needs form us way before we have any idea of what's going on. And we form beliefs about ourselves and the world depending on how those needs are or aren't met between the ages of 0 and 7. For all of us here, we grew up in a culture that church was a normal part of our life. It was the place where we gathered to bury people, to get married, to bring babies into the world. Church was a big part of our life. That's not true for our young people. And we're going to be exploring some reasons, some possibilities. It's not like I have a magic wand that can give the answer, but I do think it's worth exploring some of the questions. So my ultimate questions that I'm posing to you today is who are we individually and collectively? And what are we willing to release in order to allow new life to burst through? I think of the crocuses of spring, where the ground has been frozen and there's no sign of life anywhere. And these most exquisite flowers burst forth through the frozen earth. And each one of us has new life bursting forth through us, demanding to be expressed. I believe that with all my heart, individually and as a community. So on this day of manifestation, I want to start out by talking about Shiva and Shakti energy, which I love that we can bring in so many different explanations for who we are as eternal beings and how we exist in this world. So in Hindu mythology or Hindu religion, depending on your perspective, the universe is created and sustained by a combination of the deities Shiva and Shakti. And each of us has this energy within us, this Shiva and this Shakti. So Shiva is the masculine energy that is identified with the pure, unmanifest consciousness. Some of us might think of that as the field or the source energy. Some might name it God. It's the unmanifest potential. and sometimes is also perceived as the destroyer, because life does not hesitate to usurp the old in order to make way for the new. We see this happening around us globally right now. There's not, I don't really think there's any area of life that is not being rattled. There's this fight going on between the old, the way things used to be and the way some people think they should be, and the new that is saying, no, it didn't work. We have to do something new, and they're pretty polar opposites. So there's this interesting back and forth, isn't there? And I think many of us are feeling this also in our personal lives. We're back to masks. We just got out. We're back to masks. We've been confined, or another way of saying that is we've had the opportunity to really go within, literally, for a year. And we're all longing to get back to what was normal without the ability to do so. So something old is dying so that something new can be born, but we don't know what that new is yet. We're in the in-between time, and that's the tough time. So Shiva energy is everything that is manifest. It ties right in with our first principle of unity, that there is only one presence and one power in my life, the all-loving goodness of God. So everything is a manifestation of that energy, certainly within us. And so there's this energy coming up from the earth, Shakti energy, and Shiva energy coming down. And it's circulating through us, and optimally, it's moving up and down, enabling us to stand in our power, as well as to allow that energy to move. Sometimes that's called a Kundalini awakening. Sometimes it's enlightenment. Lots of times it's somewhere in between, because we put blocks up unconsciously, physically and emotionally. And all of this ties together because we have an image of who we are, whether we voice it or not. And we also have a life force that's causing us, pushing us to be more. Until our last breath, we have the potential to step into more. Thank goodness. And we as a community are continually being asked those same questions. Who are we? What wants to give birth here? So I'm going to repeat the words, the principles that Kathy said, read, prayed. God is all good and active in everything and everywhere. I am naturally good because God's divinity is in me and everyone. I create my experiences by what I think and what I feel and believe, and through affirmative action and prayer and meditation, I connect with the good in my life. I do and give my best by living the truth I know. We all know those. We all do our very best to feel those and to experience those. Absolutely. So if somebody were to walk in and spend the Sunday with us, how would they know that those are our principles if we don't read them? How do we live those? How do we emanate those? How do we exude those? I think that we do in many ways. And I think there are some ways that we could take a look at. I have to let you know I have Mercury in Leo, so I'm going to be asking some hard questions of us. And they're questions I ask myself. And I ask you to just consider the questions. What you do with them is entirely up to you. So what do we do really well here? We're a small congregation and we give a lot of money. I am so appreciative of the people who keep this church going. I look at how much money comes in, how much money goes out, and I'm really impressed. There are some very generous people who give a lot financially, and I think that's to be commended. And then we as a community give that money out to various causes. And I think that's also a good way that we live these principles. We are a team ministry. Almost, I think without exception, everybody here is involved in some capacity of being church, sharing their gifts, sharing their talents, sharing their hard work, making us all feel welcome. I especially, even though I almost never am available for your calls, I appreciate your messages. The prayer chaplains, the people who pray every day for all of us, that's very rare, I think, in any community, and I really value that. And it's living our principles. I think we're very open-minded. We're open-hearted. And we think of ourselves as progressive. We're not a typical Christian church. We're a New Thought church, rooted in the Christ consciousness. All of those things are fabulous. It would be fun to have a conversation and know what drew you here, where you came from. I know we've shared some of that before. For most of us, it was a painful path getting here and a breath of fresh air once we arrived here, because we're with like-minded people. We fit, we connect here. And now I'm going to challenge us a little bit. So, fair warning. The building that we're housed in is a church. And church is loaded with meaning. People driving by recognize this as a church, for better or for worse. I'm just really commenting that this physical structure that we're in expresses who we are, although I don't know what that is. It's just that it's a church. It wasn't always, but it is. It's a church with pews. It's a church with sacristy. It's very comforting and very familiar for those of us who have had positive experiences within church. I don't know about people who have had religious trauma, how that may or may not affect them. But it's an observation. We also have both chairs and pews. And I do remember we wanted to keep everybody happy, and we've been able to do that. But it's kind of a mixed message, like, are we? It's just interesting that we have both. It works. It just says something about us. How old is the median age here? We're up there, which is also typical of our generation. We could examine the service itself. How welcoming and inviting and fresh and new is the service that we participate in every week? There's a lot of talk in our service. There's usually a lot of music. With our masks and COVID, we can't have nearly as much music as we used to. There's very little silence. So we do a really good job of connecting cerebrally with one another when we're here. We also connect with our heart, but most of what we're talking about and teaching and communicating is there's just a lot. There's not a lot of silence. We have some, and we have some music. We close with the same song every week, which is like our anthem. We know what's coming, and we look forward to that. And it's the same song every week. Technology is spotty at best, and this is not anybody's fault. We've got fabulous people who support technology, and we're on Zoom. But I'm bringing all of this up because in a moment I'm going to look at the generations and where young people are going, and do we want young people, or are we really content, absolutely happy with who we are and who's here? It's like Cheers. I love coming in and seeing everybody. I like feeling like I belong here. My heart and my brain, all of me is connected here. But we're aging faster than we would like. So again, the need to connect and the need not to feel rejection is paramount to all of us. And those of us who are spiritually awakened and those of us who grew in the culture we did, our spirituality is fed here. I just have to breathe because that feels like it was a lot of criticism, and I don't mean it that way. So I want to be really clear that I don't mean this in a criticism. I really do mean this as, let's talk about this. Let's just get it on the table. And I've been accused of being the one to speak what others don't, so that's part of my job. This is from the Gospel of Philip, one of those Gospels that didn't make it into the canon. Yeshua did not reveal himself as he is in reality, but according to the capacity of those who wanted to see him. I'll read that again. Yeshua did not reveal himself as he is in reality, but according to the capacity of those who wanted to see him. If we look back over our lives, boy, what a ride, huh? What a ride, where we started spiritually to where we are today. And it's exciting to think where we might be in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. There was a point in my life that I'm not going to go into now, but you all know that the pivot point for me was my near-death experience, and that I got 7 downloads during that time, which come into play. There is only love. They're very similar to the 5 principles. We are one. Each of us is an expression of love, meaning there's no way we can not be lovable. We matter far more than we know. Now this one, I have tended to minimize. But what I got was religion got it wrong. There's no such thing as time, and there's no such thing as death. And you also know that I was raised in a very strict family, and that for me, family and church were together. They were synonymous. And when I came back from my near-death experience, it was not okay to talk about. And I got that message really, really clearly. And my 2 needs to connect and not feel rejected kept me within a church until I was 50. That was 12 years ago, 62 today. And I did my very best to bridge those 2 worlds. I did not want to let go because everything I knew was there. But everything that I had experienced was here and not there. And in the midst of that, I got a master's in pastoral theology from Catholic University, of course. And, and my thesis was evidence, now as I look back, of how I was trying to bridge those 2. Because this is all about, it's called A New Model of Faith Formation for Children and Youth, rooted in parental participation. This was finished in 2005. So back then already, we were trying to figure out, where are the youth? How can we engage with them more? How can we make them feel a part? How can we make them feel loved and valuable? How can we make them a part of our church? And though it's not gotten better since that time. But I've gotten more clear on it's time for me to be true to who I am. And that means I am calling out church because this was the message that I got, and I'm no longer afraid to do it. Looking at some Pew Research, it's been going on for a long time, but the most recent one was 2019, this data. So when we look at the silent generation, there's only 11% of the silent generation that claim to have no religion, no participation, which means, what is that, 89% of the silent generation have participated or consider themselves participants in church. Now in boomers, all of us who were born before 1965, There's 17% who claim not to have any religion, which I can't do the math. Nancy? 83. Okay. 83% of boomers consider themselves to belong to some kind of a religion, that it's important to them, which all of us fall into for the most part. And that matters because it was just such a normal part of our culture that this is where we gathered. And we continue to find meaning here because at some point along the way, recent or long past, it did provide meaning for us, and it still does. And I celebrate that. Now, the Generation X, born from 65 to 81, 23% claim not to have any religion. And here's what gets interesting. The millennials, everybody born from 82 to 94, as well as Generation Z, 95 to 2010, 1/3 claim to have no religion. What's different is that the millennials say only 15% of them are agnostic or atheist, whereas Gen Z is almost 25%. Identify as agnostic or atheist. I think we want to pay attention to this. Not that we can change it. I don't know that we can change it. It could be just something that's passing away. This could be part of the new that's bursting forth. It could be that church is going to pass away or get very small the way that we have known it. I don't know, and I have no judgment about it. I know that church is and continues to be an important aspect of my life. So what do Gen Z and millennials participate in? How do they get these needs met for connection and not rejection? They're activists. They want to experience themselves as feeling valued, and they are not waiting to make a difference in the world. Because from their perspective, I mean, we've all heard, okay, boomer, right? It's like, they're done with us, by and large. Greta Thunberg, I can't say her name right. Greta Thunberg? That's not, Greta, you know, the activist. Greta. Malala, the young woman who was scarred and has now become a huge feminist activist. Amanda Gorman, the poet laureate that we all were inspired by. These people are out there and they are very busy and they are very active and they are seeking and they are making a difference. It's just not happening in church. But there's also a danger to that because suicide rates, violence, there's a disconnection, something between church participation and nothing at all. That bridge is yet to be built, and that's what I'm excited about. How do we help the young people wake up to their value and the support that is available to them if they're not here? I don't know. Where are they going also? I can tell you that Pentecostal churches have a bigger draw than others. Because why? Because they're experiential. They have things like altar calls. They have tremendous bands. They have all kinds of things that make people feel alive and connected. They're also going to things like Joe Dispenza events. I've talked briefly about Joe. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more here. Dr. Joe Dispenza was he's still a chiropractor. Chiropractor who was riding a bicycle, got hit by a truck, ended up with fractured vertebrae. He was told he would need Harrington rods in order to ever walk again. Chose not to do that. And through a process that he now teaches other people, healed those vertebrae and is now helping other people experience the miracles that we read about in the Bible and have experienced in congregations. It's certainly not like that's the only place it's happening. But he has workshops that he does globally, and they literally sell out 1,100 to 1,500 participants in 45 minutes with a 9,000 person waiting list. Most of those people are 50 and younger. A lot of young people there. So that tells me There's something young people are looking for, not that we can meet that need or even that it's ours to meet, but to be aware of there's something experiential, transformative that young people are looking for, that I'm looking for, that I celebrate, and he's onto something there. And I can tell you that part of the formula that he teaches is lined up with what heart math teaches. He teaches people how to tap into the field, source energy, and create a new reality from that place. I don't have to go into that. He happens to have phenomenal band, sound system, dancing. They're fun. They're also about 16 hours a day of meditation. So I'm just tossing out interesting things I've been observing through the week. I don't have answers. I have questions. Who are we? Who are we called to be? Because when we make that decision, anything is possible. Anything is possible. But we can't be wishy-washy. We can't do this for me, this was half Catholic and half near-death experience. And it's terrible because I didn't commit to what I knew to be true about myself. And for me, I think my time in church is probably limited because I can either trust what Spirit downloaded to me and go to where I'm called, or stay here and be half in and half out. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go. I suspect it might be a little both. But those of us who are here, solidly in unity, who are you? What do you want to create? If you get crystal clear on that, there's absolutely no reason why we can't experience that soon. Manifestation is happening fast. But we have to be held accountable. We're asking people, our politicians, to be accountable. We're asking our young people to be accountable. We're asking our police force to be accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable. One thing that really turned me off from Joe Dispenza for years, science is that his quote is, "Science has become the contemporary language of the mystical." That just made me mad. Because I didn't want to make science the voice of the mystical. I like claiming the language of divinity. I like claiming the language of spirituality. It's my first language. And it's how I awaken to the divine. But I have to tell you, there's something to be said about his approach to young people who are so angry and turned off by churches that were not held accountable. I'm not going to go into what we're discovering today. Those of you who watch the news are very aware of it. And it's just part of our past. Unity has done a pretty darn good job of owning up to its racism past, more recently than before. But once we say, yes, we were acting in a less than loving way, especially through racism, then we can atone to it, which means come back to at one-ment. We are one, and we have to be held accountable for those ways in which we separate within ourselves and within one another, because then we can come back to one and go forward. And that's really my hope. But so many people are turned off by the language of what we are very comfortable with, religion, spirituality. So science gets them in the door, and then they have a mystical experience. Whew. And I'm telling you, there are some powerfully mystical experiences that are happening in these resorts. Not resorts, both individually and definitely at the events. Well, that feels heavy. When we combine our heart with our head, getting coherent, which means getting out of our thinking brain into our open-minded brain, balanced with our heart, in the same way that if you walk into a clock shop, all of the pendulums, there we go, all those things that go back and forth, all the pendulums will be, they're all synchronized. So too, will we synchronize, and do we synchronize to the energy of love when we just go within, center in our heart, breathe in and out love. And once we get into that place, then we go into our head, working together so that we see, feel, and radiate the oneness of all of life. And I'm going to play a song. It's called The Eyes of God. And I love this song. I love this song because it captures what my experience was with the mystical. I suspect many of you will also really resonate with this because you've all had experiences of the mystical. So now, let's see. My phone. I invite you to just close your eyes and listen to the song.
I woke up from a dream. I was a blade of grass. I felt the miracle
as you come back into the room, know the truth that you are the breath of God, and we are within the breath of God. Okay, so the prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.